My wife, Rita, is the person that created the culminating event that started customer service. And we just described and got to discuss the development of kind of incident management procedures. And that was a pretty intense period of development and management and sort of using the model of taking SOPs through the whole process back through the revision thing. I mean, so there was a lot of real management stuff in it. Now, I don't remember exactly when it was, but my wife was lecturing me about something that I needed to be lectured about, and she said, you know, people are going to remember a lot longer how nice you were as opposed to how smart you were. And she says, some days you're a lot smarter than you are nice. I said, well, what do you tell me about that, dear? And she said, you know, people connect and relate a lot more emotionally than they do logically. And you ought to maybe study that a little bit, son. So, you know, it's one of those things that I probably said something sarcastic to her and went off and spent the next 6 months trying to figure out what she was trying to tell me. And I was in a position during that period of time where I got a lot of response from customers, and both as the assistant chief and then the fire chief. And honestly, I never read their whole letter for years, because when they said that we were fast and we were effective, I quit reading. Well, there was another 2 pages about how nice we were to them. So truly, and honestly, one day I read the whole letter, and I kind of sat there and thought about it and said, you know, Mrs. Smith didn't say anything here about fire trucks or incident command or creating management subdivisions or how dazzling our radio communications were. And as I took the letters apart, I came up with people, pets, pictures, and pills. That's what she remembered. She remembered the way we treated her. So, and it was just that simple, too, is that we sort of had that little revelation and went off from there and said, let's begin to look at the work that we do for the community in the terms of the community, not just our own terms, because that's really what we had done. Now, not to take anything away from the development of delivering standard, effective, safe, quick service, but that really, from the standpoint of the customer, they don't remember a lot of technical, tactical stuff. They mostly do indeed remember the way that they were treated. And the memory that they have has to do with a set of things that connected to their feelings a lot more than anything else. Well, and during this period of time, I'm sort of bouncing this off my wife, and she just keeps saying, don't make it complicated, just be nice. And she said it enough that it sunk in, and that really became kind of the guiding 2 words in the system, really, was just simply be nice. Now, there's obviously a lot of technology and a lot of system stuff and just a lot of dynamics in being nice. In other words, how do you actually package up a response that creates that memory in that customer? But it was, and that probably all occurred in 4 or 5 years, I guess. And I kept taking notes on it and trying to make sense out of it, and started to do some writing on it. And then it's another one of those things that ended up in a little simple textbook, and it's been around now for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, and been distributed fairly widely. But it was the easiest change that we ever made, is that mostly in the firefighters, and I've had a chance to talk to a bunch of firefighters around the country through the years about it, and when you said be nice, they said, okay, let's eat. You know, I mean, it was pretty simple. I've never had a firefighter argue with me. Now, they'll talk about different service delivery situations, but I never had a firefighter saying, I don't think it's our role to be nice. I mean, it's kind of silly even to say it, you know. So it was the simplest change we ever made.
And I'm wondering, would you share a couple of stories that wowed the fire chief, that wowed you, not just the customer, but made you think, where'd they come up with that at?
Some of them are sad stories, but it's what we do. You hear a story that a woman has a older woman has a medical emergency and dies from that medical emergency. We attend her death, like we do in the medical services that we deliver. The companies call her daughter in this process. They completely changed the woman's clothes, her nightgown. They cleaned her up. They changed her bed linen. They put the house in order. And they said, and we did that before we called their daughter, because they didn't want her daughter to see their mother like that. And you think, that's added value in the process. Simple things. You get a letter from a woman's daughter that says, you took my mother to the hospital the other day. Your big fire truck came with an ambulance, engine company and ambulance. And they treated my mother, stabilized her, and took her to Good Samaritan Hospital. She tells me that there were 2 young firefighters on the ambulance. And when she got to the hospital, she was upset. And the firefighters asked her what was going on. And she said that she forgot her pink, fuzzy security slippers. They went back to her house and got her slippers. Simple little thing. She says, we couldn't believe that somebody would do that for our mom. You ask the firefighters about it and commend them and thank them for doing that. And they think, well, what's the big deal? She forgot her slippers. She was upset. We went and got them. We were in service. We would have been able to go on a call if we didn't get a call, but we were certainly available to do that. And they didn't think it was a big deal. Well, it was to that family. So there's a lot of little things like that you hear people talk about somebody treating them in a way that makes that difference. I mean, that's what you're really trying to do.
I know you brought up a point there inadvertently, but I guess it does open up a vulnerability for folks to criticize or to say, wow, while you were getting the slippers, you were out of service, as an example. But I think in your textbook and in your collection of experiences, the same firefighter who tries to figure out an avenue to assist a customer is also trying to make sure that the system is well served, instead of saying, well, I went and got the fuzzy slippers and I was out of service for 3 or 4 hours and sort of take advantage. Yeah. You really haven't, because I'm afraid to say, I think some command level officers out there would see it as the possibility for us, for our side, for the members, to abuse the department.
Well, I guess that sort of gets you around to another customer service issue, is that what you see pretty quickly in organizational behavior is that the workers in an organization deliver service the way they receive support. Now in the slipper case, all those young firefighters had to do was push a button on their mobile computer terminal that says we're available on an incident. In other words, we've created a status to do that. And they will dispatch them and deploy them away from whatever errand. Let me call it an errand. I don't mean that in a frivolous way, but if they're running an errand for a customer, they certainly would not want or let anybody die or have a fire expand or whatever. And we're smart enough to manage that and tell the kids, if you want to do something for Mrs. Smith, push the button and go do it. I mean, I think that they see that that's a sensible response on the part of the organization. Now, we're not trying to, I never heard a business plan for us to get into the slipper delivery business. But you talk a lot about today in management and leadership and organizational behavior about empowerment. What are you empowered to do? What does that actually mean in the street? But when you sort of look at it, what it really means in the street is that you can add value. You deliver core service within SOPs and training and guidelines and practice and so on. Once you do that in a standard kind of way. In other words, we got pictures of the way in Atlanta you lay hose and raise ladders. That's the way you want them to lay hose and raise ladders. When it's over, if you can do people, pets, pictures, or pills, you're empowered to do that. And your department has been a perfect example of that. When you get finished doing that for them, go back to what you were doing before. Go back to delivering core service. But what empowerment means is that you can go out of that core service delivery context, do something special for the customer that doesn't take away from service delivery or optics or anything else. And when you get finished, then you go back to whatever you're doing. I mean that in the sense of going back to your regular status and so on. Now, I guess if we had enough people that needed their slippers delivered, that could be a business opportunity for us.
I've heard you say many times in the classroom setting about if you would track a mean child, back to their home, you'd probably find a mean parent.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that if you want to change the behavior of the worker, change the behavior of their boss, start with the boss. Because most of the time in organizational behavior, that's where the challenge is, honestly, in any organization. And that the biggest problem in customer service is a dysfunctional relationship with your immediate supervisor. Fix the immediate supervisor. But make Mrs. Smith magnetic north. Say the reason we're here is to deliver service to Mrs. Smith. It isn't to deliver service to the mayor or the city manager, the fire chief, or the Chamber of Commerce. Now, clearly, those are critical people in the food chain that we ought to acknowledge and be respectful of and include them and connect them and so on. But every day a fire department gets up to go take care of the Smith family. That ought to be what our direction is in the process. It will serve us better and more than any other single thing. And bosses ought to ask, is what I'm doing right now, does it connect to improving the service that or supporting the service that we deliver? It's actually pretty simple, but there's a lot of organizational static in doing that. In other words, there's a lot of junk that occurs in organizations that disrupts the way the workers can deal with the customers. Try to get service in this country. Service stinks in the United States. And I mean, that isn't me. These are people who study it. And it isn't getting any better. That's the reason that the fire service stands out so much. In addition to that they need to stand out because of the exceptional job that they do. But I mean, you think about it. You call us, we ask you two questions. Where are you and what's the matter? There's no forms, there's no applications, there's no computer screens, there's no mindless bureaucrats. We're out the door. When we get there, we go to work immediately on whatever is out of control. When it's under control, we get it under control. We account for all of our people and the customers. We clean it up. We thank them and we go home. Now, that's the best form of government. That's what people want from government. And the problem with government, you can't get them and then you can't get rid of them. We're the easiest to get and the easiest to get rid of. We go back to the station and we fix whatever we need to so we're ready to go to the next call and we wait for the next call. I mean, it's really an incredible service if you look at it.
In that I've had a chance to talk to a joint friend, Gordon Sweetnam from Calgary, Canada, and I guess him and Chief Morris talked about receiving the highest rating in the entire city government, if not in the entire provincial government, making this little taping somewhat international by talking about our northern neighbors. But also, not only were they at the 89 or 90% satisfactory level, but very disappointingly, they were also identified as an agency that could withstand a reduction of 10 or even perhaps 15% of resources. So that's a really slippery slope that I guess the fire chief needs to pay attention to.
Right. But yeah, and that's just a squeaky wheel kind of a issue.
Squeaky wheel meaning perhaps, and I'm going to say police agency, but continuing to cry the fact that there's drugs and other problems in society, more resources to resolve. Is that sort of the direction?
And I think the police service can create a crime wave just by reporting crime.
And what happens with us? How do we react to that to make sure that our resources aren't diminished?
By representing the service delivery needs that we have, I think using customer service in a positive kind of way, of taking customer service as the basis for resources and making sense out of that, to say that we have trends that we're concerned about in the sense of the way we're able to respond, that our activity is going up, our response times are also going up, to be definitive and professional and crisp in the way that we make those presentations to the system. In other words, to simply represent the needs that we have to continue to deliver that service. I mean, and that's certainly positive. And I'd turn it around. I don't think that there's a system that improved any more than Atlanta. And you received almost 200 new positions this year.
Right.
So I think that in other words, I don't think that you can just deliver good customer service and go to sleep as a boss. You have to manage that system. You have to represent it. You have to be current. You have to understand where and what is going on in that system, and you have to represent that very actively. I think that in most systems, there's a political connection that you need to make to connect to. In other words, to say that there's a political, in the sense of council people who represent areas in the city and interest and so on, to say here's the actual picture of customer service. Our customer service status in your district or what you represent in clear, definitive terms where you say, this is what I need. And we need to focus on what we need. You can't just go in and say, I want more. We laugh about that, but you have to say, this is what I have to deliver this service. You won't get all of it, but you won't get any of it unless you do that, because all those other devil departments are doing the same thing in a city, so they're trying to get your resources, and you're trying to get theirs. I hate the Parks Department and Solid Waste in Phoenix. They're both two absolutely. And the police department, terrific. All the departments are really terrific, but those two are just awful.
They're getting the resources.
Oh, the way they treat people is just horrible. They're so nice to them. No, and you want to do that. And you do that in a good-natured and balanced kind of way. I mean, you don't. I think that you could use customer service in an unfair way because you are so popular. I think you pay a price for that. You can win too big.
You got off into an area that I guess two lessons I think I have learned by having the wonderful opportunity to be close to you for so many years, and that is to be consistent and to always have the plan ready. You never know when the funding's going to happen or how we're going to be able to expand or to look at opportunities, so you better not look at a gift horse twice. Are those pretty straightforward statements?
The consistent part is make it simple. We did it in 5 words. We said prevent harm, survive, be nice. Simple. The other is you got to have it in your pocket. And it got to be a joke there, is that the city manager, the budget director would say, don't take that card out of your pocket. Leave it in your pocket, old man. We don't want to see what's on that card. Because they knew it was literally it was in my pocket.
And
it was good natured, and I think that the message was these guys know what they want. In other words, when they come over and they say they will bore you with more statistics and maps and diagrams and scatter charts and cartoons, and they said, I think sometimes they just gave it to you so they didn't have to look at all that stuff. No, not really. Yeah, but a lot of it is just that. Is keep it simple. In other words, don't make it Chinese algebra. Prevent harm. We're the harm preventers. We got 60 locations. We're always there. We got a 4-minute response time. You get there and you can intervene while the problem is underway. You made a promise to get in between Mrs. Smith physically and the problem. You got to survive that. That's an awful place a lot of times to put a worker. Huge responsibility. We talked about that this morning. And the others, be nice. Just simply treat people with kindness, respect, patience. I mean, it's not a complicated kind of thing. But it's when you do those three things, that's pretty powerful. I mean, it leaves it has an interesting effect in what it leaves.
What are other ways that you have and the system has rewarded the characters that, again, provide that absolute wow service?
Well, we had awards that we could give. In other words, there was a employee recognition program like there is in most cities. We didn't use it very much. We started to use it. A lot of simple things. I've gone places and seen the little Post-it note framed that I sent someone. Rube, good job. You really did a good job. That was a tough call, Bruno. Or I'd just write my little glasses. I got a little symbol that I use with just horn-rimmed glasses. And the thing's in a little frame. And I'm thinking, I stuck that on an alarm report or something and sent it to you, and you framed it. I'm thinking, we got to commend people more here.
But that's pretty powerful.
No, it is. No, you lose track of it when you're a boss. Is that both ways? Is you'll walk by a crew at a fire and stop and talk to them for 2 minutes, and 10 years later, that crew will thank you again for doing that. By the same token, you'll be preoccupied and you'll walk by that crew and not say something to them. And that afternoon, the captain, you've had this happen to you 1,000 times, the captain calls and said, "Are you mad at us?"
How powerful or important is it to reward the employees that have exemplified customer service?
Well, it's the centerpiece of it, and it's simply the organization, the functional organization, continually reinforcing their gratitude to the worker for doing what they do to the customer, for the customer. And the really terrific examples say that it is incessant positive affirmation to the workers. It's the most powerful thing in the system, in the organization. But the problem is that in most organizations, and this is a sad fact, again, of the people who are involved in it, that a commendation creates more stress on a worker than a reprimand because they have more experience dealing with a reprimand. Now, that's just a sad kind of a thing when you think about it. I don't think that any service, but certainly the fire service, is anywhere close to developing systems that have to do with recognition, gratitude, appreciation, simply thank you in the process. I think that that's a struggle for any organization, including the Phoenix Fire Department. I mean, I think we did a lot better as we went on because we saw that behavior inside got modeled on the outside.
How about the green sheet? I hear about the infamous green sheets quite a bit.
The green sheet came out of the yellow sheets. For 45 years in my career, we had a yellow sheet. It was a report of unsatisfactory performance. And what we would say, it was kind of almost a little joke in the system, is anything, if you did something that was a little bit out of balance, you say, "I'm going to yellow sheet you." Well, one day we had a big breakfast, and we said, if you have a report of unsatisfactory performance, you ought to have a report of exceptional performance. So we did the green sheet, ended up green. And the yellow sheet was actually on yellow paper. So we had a yellow sheet and a green sheet. We'd write like 600 green sheets and one yellow sheet in the course of a month or whatever it was. I mean, it was just so disproportionate that it was goofy. And most of the time, the yellow sheet was that some recruit in recruit school didn't take a hydrant right, and they just were documenting it with that. Generally, at Friday, they threw them away if the kid took the hydrant the way they should. But we saw just an incredible avalanche of exceptional performance, writing them on service that was outside the system, but service inside. I mean, some of them were really neat. I mean, you'd have a crew write a green sheet on their officer. I mean, those are worth $1 million too. I mean, they frame those. But I think that's another wasteland for us, is that how do you in an organization like a fire department continually reinforce just that appreciation in the system? I mean,
If I'm in the audience watching Chief Brunacini tell me about a Keystone program, which it is, about customer service, what do I do on the small end? What do I do in the small town I grew up in, Brentwood, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., or, Well,
you're the model. Phoenix ain't the model. Phoenix, the 5th largest city in the country. What we told the Phoenix Fire Department is, you got to act like you're Brentwood. And we would have people say that to us. They'd say, I come from a little town in Nebraska, and I had some reason to call you all. You treated me like I was in a little town in Nebraska. And a fire company is a neighbor in that first due area. And we say, be a good neighbor. In other words, don't make us a big city. And I don't mean to be negative about big cities, but big cities can get pretty calloused, pretty impersonal. I've seen it all. Hey, lady, I've been to a fire and this ain't one. I mean, we're sarcastic and so on, separated from the customers. We end up being mercenaries. We said wrong. That's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to look and act and treat people like they were in Brentwood. If Mrs. Smith is sitting at a bus stop with 2 sacks of groceries and it starts raining and you drive by her, you wouldn't do that in Brentwood. Well, now again, and we're not in the taxi business, but again, at that moment, you have an opportunity in where you are with the resources you have to make a difference in somebody. And that's what it is. I mean, that's the empowerment thing.
But Chief,
I trust Engine 1 to take an 18-ton truck and drive a Code 3 right up Central Avenue. And they represent the only agency in our form of government that doesn't need a search warrant to go in a building. And I don't trust them to give an old lady a ride in the rain. That's pretty stupid. Because every day there's 440 firefighters on duty that if they wanted to, they could wreck the city. Well, they never have. They've always taken care of it. They've been very kind to it, and they've been very professional. Now, it's a pretty goofy message to say that I don't trust you to go get a woman's slippers. They can stop her heart. They can shock her and stop. First thing, they can cut all her clothes off of her. That's the most power any government agency has. They can cut her throat. They can stick a tube down her throat. And they can stick big lines in her arm and say, I'll let you do that. They do it 150 times a day in Phoenix. But you can't go get her slippers? I mean, you can eat an elephant and choke on a gnat. I mean, it's pretty simple, really. And I think there's liability in not giving somebody a ride. Because I think if somebody wanted to, they would say, you could have made a difference in that person's welfare, and you didn't do it. You didn't use public resources to help her. or him or whoever it was, and you had access and the ability to do that. I mean, I think that you could turn that argument around. And I don't think, look at liability. If you want to look at liability, everybody's liability crazy today. Who doesn't get sued? You know the answer to that. People that are nice. I was a fire chief 28 years. I never spent a dime on a lawyer. Now, I was in a special place, and I understand that, but there were a lot of other places in that city that they were spending a lot on lawyers. I never did. We never had a personnel issue that was contested in the system. I mean,
pretty amazing when you think about it.
And you know what it was? It was exactly what my wife told me. Is just simply be nice. Is to say, today, Firefighter Smith, you outperformed our ability to solve your problems, and we want you to be successful, and you're going to have to go someplace else to be successful, and we're going to help you however we can. We'll provide resources to you, we'll counsel, we'll help you, we'll drive you to the next place. We never had anybody come back and say that we didn't treat them fairly. And that didn't happen very often, but you got 2,000 people, you got a lot of different stories in the system.
What's the power of customer service with the elected officials and administrative officials outside or beyond the scope of the fire department?
It's an interesting three-cushion shot. Is that you don't have to brag about yourself because they're bragging about you. It's a lot more powerful. In other words, that the person who represents you is the person who's receiving the service continually in the community. That is an enormously influential piece of a system. As far as the reputation, the stature, the affection, the way those people who are the customers regard you and represent you based on the way you serve them. And then they tell war stories. The slipper, I don't have a fixation on slippers, honestly. I have on high heel shoes, but not slippers. But that family will tell the slipper story around the family folklore dinner table for the next 200 years. We don't have to say a word. They'll do it for us in the process. And we do the same thing. I mean, we do it in our own lives. I mean, so we're no different in the relationship that we have to customers as the people when we're customers in the process.
Chief, a little bit more difficult question, at least it is for me. What's next in the customer service world? What's on the horizon? What does Chief Alan Brunacini see on the crystal ball, or in the crystal ball, rather?
I think the systems that are going to prosper, when I look at it, let me be a consultant for a minute, and I promise I won't do it over a minute. I think the fire departments that are going to prosper are the fire departments that have a plan for added value. Added value is so powerful in that whole area. And if you look at, and there's some examples of it, if you look at the hospitality industry, the 5-star high-end destination locations have a definitive strategy, plan, management model for the way they add value. And they start that with their customers. Now, they say that's a very profitable business because, as one of them said, they charge more for the rooms. But it's very competitive. In other words, if you run the Biltmore in Phoenix, you're competing against the Phoenician or the Wigwam or whatever. So you have got to stay ahead of the competition. Well, I said it before, and I mean it not in a destructive way, but we're staying ahead of the Cobbs, the Parks Department, sanitation, and so on. And again, I mean that in an integrated kind of a system way. But I think that that's what's next for us. And we have depended on the serendipity of our employees, of our firefighters, to do added value. We should, in Phoenix, let me say, in the Phoenix Fire Department, we should have had more of a definitive slipper delivery piece in an SOP. I think that sounds kind of funny, but it's but kind of the other side of it is that if you want the firefighters to add value on the outside, you have to add value on the inside. And I think that that's another balance in the thing, is to say that those firefighters, those two young, handsome, fit firefighters, in the course of their career are going to forget their slippers. Then the Phoenix Fire Department has to go get their slippers. And whatever that looks like. It may not be slippers, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Anything we're missing on customer service?
No, I think, I guess what we've said here, Dennis, is keep it simple. Be patient with it. Somebody said, do what you can with what you have where you are. That's what we're talking about. Little things mean a lot.
Do me a favor. Let's close with a really powerful story. We're getting too close to an hour on the tape. But I'm wondering if the snake story or the keys story or the finishing of the concrete story, would you hit any one of those, whichever one you like the best?
The story that got people's attention was a concrete story that we wrote in a customer service book. And it was a simple little story. And what it was, they went on an EMS call to a construction site. And the guy who was finishing cement had a medical emergency. He had a coronary. And he was pouring a driveway, and he had the concrete placed and tamped and screeded. Now it's in the warm part of the year at Phoenix, which is pretty warm. This crew stabilizes him. In other words, they treated him, and in the treatment they obviously are right next to this driveway. Well, the captain looks at this concrete and he says, "Shit, that concrete's setting up." Well, there's a truck company that runs in with this captain that has two guys on it. They're cement finishers. So he calls his truck company. He says, "Get over here. We got to finish this guy's cement." So they got in the truck. They didn't ask anybody. They got in the truck and came over. They called the battalion chief and they said, "We ain't going in the concrete business on duty." But he told them what was going on. The BC came over. They finished the cement. Took them 30 minutes maybe. Washed the guy's tools, put him on his truck, and drove it to the fire station and locked it all up. The medics or whoever, the AMBO guys, ended up telling who went back to the hospital. In other words, they go to this hospital 10 times a day. They wrote the guy a note, or they went to see him, and they said, "Hey, when you get stabilized here, your truck is at the fire station there, and everything is fine. They took care of your concrete and so on." Well, the guy wrote me a letter. The cement guy wrote me a letter, and he said, "This is amazing." And he said, in fact, he says, "Those guys finished that cement a lot better than I would. Those guys are really good cement finishers." And so we put it in the book, in the customer service book. And I've had firefighters come up to me and they said, I don't even know they're firefighters, but they recognize me and they say, "Hey, we'll do it all, but we ain't finishing any cement." I laugh at them, and shake hands and say, "Where are you from?" and so on. And when you think about it, what's 10 yards of cement worth?
A lot of money.
A lot of money. Now, if it sets up and it's not finished, you got to jackhammer it out. And I want to say that the captain who recognized that said, "This is like $8,000 or $10,000. Now, what would we do for $8,000 or $10,000 worth of fire damage?
Throw a lot of salvage covers.
See, yeah, well, and he said, "What's the difference? We could make a difference. We did. I've never heard of us finishing any other cement in the process."
Did the crew get green sheeted?
Oh yeah, no, it was a big deal. Yeah, you know what they said? What a big deal! It took us half an hour. What's a big deal? We were watching television. We were in service. I mean, they wouldn't let somebody die while they were finishing cement. They didn't have any calls that came in while they were doing it, so they were able to do it, and they didn't think very much about it. They said, "God, we're finishing cement all the time on our days off. We'd certainly appreciate somebody doing that for us. Be nice." I mean, it was just kind of real
Goes
simple.
back to that principle, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But it was kind of a story that got firefighters' imaginations, because most of them probably fussed around a little bit in their lives with concrete, and so they could kind of relate to it there in their own terms. That was kind of an interesting story, though, that got their attention, I guess. True story too.
And made the local paper? Not necessarily.
I don't remember that it did. One of them that made the paper was
Haircut?
the haircut one, yeah, which is kind of a cute story. They went on an EMS call. So you've heard the story in a barber shop, and the barber was having some medical emergency, so they stabilized a guy and packaged him up, put him in our ambulance, and drove him away. Well, one of the firefighters knew a little bit about haircutting, so they finished the guy's haircut that was sitting in the chair. And that got in the newspaper. But that was kind of a cute story. Somebody said, "Well, how did it look? How did his haircut look?" He said, "A hell of a lot better than half a haircut, because that's what he had when the barber fell over. The guy was sitting there with half a haircut." So, but it was, yeah.
Well, thanks, Chief.
Deal. No, thank you, Dennis. Fun stuff.